Beth Houck, welcome to Human Side Up. I'm very interested in this conversation we're going to have today. And you've already shown up with such sweet and grounded energy. So I'm here for it. So thank you for making time to chat with me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we kick off every episode with a question for our guest that tries to sort of helps me get grounded in who you are and sort of how you show up. And it's really given the idea that we are a lot of different things, right? And this comes from my dream, frankly, about blowing up the resume, which is an entirely different conversation. But it started there. And so we're so much more than that. And so I am curious to answer the question, what are maybe 2 or 3 words that you would use to describe yourself that we might not see on a CV or a resume or your LinkedIn page, but they've been core to who you are and how you've arrived here. And also, when did you start to own them as true about yourself?
Okay. Wow. That's a good way to start. And I would say it's you know what? It's really interesting. You asked the question and I immediately am in my head editing a little bit, which I think is going to help give my answer, which is, I feel like anybody that knows me knows I'm incredibly authentic. But I don't think that shows up on a resume. I think that's something that you have to earn over time. I think it's your second part of your question that made me answer it that way, because I think it was really hard to be authentic at lots of early parts in my career because I felt like I was supposed to be a certain way. So authentic is for sure the first word I would use. I really like to own that I'm also pretty fun and funny. Actually, is that's sort of obnoxious?
No, that's awesome.
Call yourself funny, right?
I love it.
Comedians do that, right? But I try to bring humor into my management style, my leadership. And that's also kind of the other flip side of that authenticity. I didn't know that was okay for a while too. So when you say when did I know that it was okay to bring that? I actually almost have an exact memory of it.
Would you be willing to share it?
Sure, why not? So I worked at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, which has been renamed the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. It was next door to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where I also worked. Okay, so I worked at Northwestern, and wasn't there long, although it was really impactful in lots of ways. But I was really, really not the right culture fit in there. If you have me on here, I have a very entrepreneurial background. That's most of my career. So back, in the 90s when I was at Northwestern Hospital, they had a requirement that when you did a PowerPoint presentation that the font size be of a certain height. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. The entrepreneurial kind of rule breaker part of me was are you joking? We have to worry about the freaking font size, right? So I just remember thinking again, I was supposed to be a certain way. I was supposed to be a little bit more polished, a little bit more proper. This was a time when, we dressed a certain way, right? All of the things. So when I left Northwestern, I remember consciously telling myself I was going to try at my new place at the Rehab Institute to be a little bit more authentic. And I remember being in a meeting and it was with some senior leaders. And I don't know that this is actually all that funny, but I said, I feel like it's the United States and Canada here. You guys worry all the time, or you guys worry all the time about what Northwestern Hospital is doing. I was and Northwestern Hospital just thinks you're Canada. They don't care what you're doing. So it was kind of bringing that to the table. And I mean, I got good reaction and people understood it. And I was wow, you can say these things and it's actually okay. So yeah. So that I wouldn't say I've been perfect about my authenticity and all the time after that, but that was a moment when I got that positive reinforcement that I could be myself and it would still be actually okay.
I love that. I am not funny. Like I I have no
See,
funny
look at
bones
you.
in my body, but I am a really good audience. Like I appreciate a
You're
joke. I appreciate humor. I'm just not funny. Like I'm too I think I'm too earnest is the problem.
yeah,
And so I think I'm too earnest to actually be funny. But I love that. That to me is like a perfect example of um two things that wouldn't show up on paper about you that really impact the way that you're going to engage with other people and how you're
true.
going to lead. And um, I love that. That's a great story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Um, it makes me wonder, because you are this like funny and sort of rule breaker, entrepreneurial sort of spirit, how in the world did you end up in medicine? Like that is not this is not a world where we think of rule breakers, except maybe in research, right? Like
Yeah,
research or particular like specialties, maybe like emergency room docs and like,
right.
like there are these folks who we think of that have they're like the motorcycle riding doctors that show up, they're
Right.
like,
Yes.
they're George Clooney, they're ER, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious, like, how did you land in that world?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it that way. Although I think it relates to how do we ever pick what we're going to do or pick
Yeah.
our careers? I have college age kids, and I always say, you know, you don't know what you're going to do. Like you don't, other than if you're a trade or a teacher or somebody that's learning a specific thing that exactly relates to a career, like I was an engineer, but like would somebody say, hey, like if you study engineering, you're going to be the CEO of a healthcare technology company someday? Like, no, like you
Right.
don't, like there's not an exact line. And so I think it was as simple as I was very interested in healthcare, like the I was both interested in the science of it and what's possible. I remember being very interested at one point in biomedical engineering, which is basically like medical devices,
Uh-huh.
like the artificial heart, or how do you make I was at the Rehab Institute, like, right, how do you do like limbs, artificial limbs, that can be operated by your brain, like that was incredibly fascinating to me. And I also really liked kind of the business of healthcare, meaning like, how do you like, how do you make this better? How can you make things more efficient, or how can you change the processes to optimize something? And I think really where the entrepreneurial maybe other part comes in is just like it felt like there were lots of creative problems to solve creatively,
Yeah.
and that's the way that I think it has fit in. I sometimes think a lot about, it's too bad I didn't come of age with my interest in healthcare at a point when technology is what it is today, because the possibilities of things you can create and do and fix is just exponential what it was 20 years ago. So I think my ideas were maybe ahead of what could actually happen, but it's evolved and
Yeah.
gotten there.
Yeah. Well, you still have many years ahead of you, here's hoping. So, maybe a
Yeah,
fifth
yeah,
career,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that because I was actually going to ask you about the fact as I fondly refer to it as a zigger and a zagger. I have done many different things in my life, and I was not one of those people who was like, I want to be when I grow up. No,
Yes.
I did go through a moment, and anyone who's listened to podcasts, I did want to be either a lawyer or a doctor because I loved the Cosby Show. the Huxtables were like where I wanted to be, right?
This is how you choose things,
Yes,
right?
this is how
Yeah,
you choose things. Like there
yeah,
is a saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? And so
right,
like that
right, yeah.
representation being so important. And um but other than that, then I felt I want to be an actor because then I get paid to do all the things and I want to learn about everything. And so I was terrible
You
at it.
actually want to be on the Cosby
Yeah,
Show.
exactly. That was what I really wanted, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to be Denise. So, a whole different situation. But the reason why I kind of want to double click on this for a little bit is because I think what's interesting is you mentioned, okay, I was an engineer and now I'm a CEO. Like on paper, that isn't a straight line. And I think what's been very interesting in the last maybe 10 years ish, and that might even be generous, is I think that we're looking at the C-suite very differently. Like we used to have a very specific path, and there was a particular type of person who ended up in the C-suite, right? Outside of white male in the United States, there was also like a very specific path that they followed. They went to an Ivy League business undergraduate school, and then they went to an Ivy League business school, and they had a particular experience. Maybe they worked at like some sort of McKinsey or some sort of
McKinsey,
consulting
yes.
firm. And then they spent a little time out in the world, maybe in one business, but as soon as they got there, they weren't working in the mailroom. Like they got there and they were planted in a particular level of the organization. So there was just like this really predictable path. And if you weren't on that, you weren't considered for the C-suite. Like it just didn't make sense. Certainly not CEO, right? Like
Right.
we thought that had a particular kind of human experience behind it. And what I think has been really interesting is exactly what you were talking about for your path, and very similarly to mine, that in the last few years, I think we have actually changed our perspective on what a CEO needs to be able to do. And all those other things are valuable. I'm not trying to say that people, and if you have done that and you're a CEO, great, good for you. Like no hard feelings. But I think what's different is that we now sort of look at a CEO as more of like can you creatively problem solve on big things? Do you have this ability to really cast a vision and have people follow you? Which has become, it's always been important, but it's become more obviously important of late. And do you know enough about all of the things that you're responsible for to be well informed and then ask the questions around the things that you don't need or that you don't know, excuse me. So that path is very different. So I'm curious from your perspective, how has your experience moving from engineering through all these different places that you've been to getting to CEO? Double click. I also moved from COO to CEO, and that's a really different, it's a really different operational versus anyway. So I'd love to get your take on that. Like, how has the experience that you've had walking through the world in this very different way than most people have, and this path that you've had, influenced how you lead from this position that you're in now?
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting that you have that observation, because I think there's just that little part of me that still believes that you have to have that exact path to CEO, and potentially also be a white male, although there's lots of evidence that's showing that that is not the case. So I appreciate that many things have changed that have enabled many of us to get to this role at this point. But there is that little part of you that, still believes that it's the ones that, have that sort of compulsivity that you have if you did that McKinsey route, and there's some things. And so I definitely have zigged and zagged. I make no, kind of apologies that I'm CEO of a small company, and I don't know that I'd want to be CEO of a super large one. So, different type of person.
Sure.
I like being CEO of a small company because I feel like I can have more influence, and I like to get my hands dirty. So back to the COO to CEO movement. I like to know what's going on in the organization, and I think I build credibility with my team because they know I've touched it. They know I've done it myself, or at least been close enough to it to know that if it's hard or if this is going to be easy to do. Because sometimes it's like easy for me to say kind of stuff. I I go a little bit back to where I started with about the authenticity. I think there's more permission that I've either given myself or that the society has a little bit given me to be a different type of CEO than what was traditionally on paper. And I think that's part of what has allowed me to get to where I am. And I'm a late CEO. I'm a reluctant CEO, meaning like I didn't go seeking it out, but I have to say that I've been a number two enough times that I kind of was like, I think I can do this. I think this is gonna work out okay. And I actually kind of like it. I kind of feel like it's been a good fit for the type of person that I am and the influence that I want to have on the generation after me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So in this role now that you have, I'm curious in how you made the flip to that role in your own sort of thinking. You sort of hinted at like, well, I've been a second, so I kind of knew like what was coming. But I'm curious, what did you have to change? And were there any surprises once you got into the role that you're like, oh, yeah, I kind of wasn't thinking about that? Or, like, oh, yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I think, so again, small company, I've gotten to work alongside the CEOs quite a bit. So I felt like I had a decent understanding of what I was going to have. I do think I had to do my own mental shift. I had to tell myself it's okay to be the leader. It's okay. I continually have to remind myself, oh, you know what? Like I can actually ask for that. Like I don't have to apologize. I don't have to check with anybody. I get to just, I get to dictate. So sometimes I have to tell myself like, remember, Beth, you're the CEO. So I did have to do though a mental shift and tell myself like not like you write it out on paper or anything like that, but I had to kind of do a bit of in my head, like what kind of CEO do I want to be and really feel and own that so that when I showed up, it was authentic. It was something I felt good about, something that I had thought about as opposed to just because I think otherwise you're showing up as the COO who's doing some new jobs, like you're
Right.
not able to kind of shift it over. I think there's some things that have surprised me, not necessarily in a bad way, but I had a impression in my head around the board and financing and meeting with financial people that was let's say a little bit scary. Like my board is wonderful, so I'm not sure that they would count in this, but broadly, it's going to be hard to meet with investors. It's going to be hard for me. Those people are different than me. Those people are, more, things that are characteristics that have made them choose finance, right? Or sometimes, a little more aggressive, a little bit more cut and dry, less chatty, less funny, all of those things. So I had an impression that would be those would be hard conversations that I was going to have on a regular basis. And I have learned, and they were hard at the beginning because I couldn't quite find my bearings. And I think I went back on what I knew, which was to try to be like them, to try to not be authentic, to try to kind of fit a mold that I felt like they were asking for or looking for. And then over time, I realized they're just people. They're just people. They have families at home and insecurities, and they're just people. They're just people, and they're there to help me improve my company and they just happen to have money to do that. And so if I could kind of just reframe it as these, ask them questions, like learn from them because they're out in the market. Be authentic when you're telling the story. Here's what I really know and I'm excited about with my business, and here's what I don't know. When I kind of gave myself the permission to not try to fit a mold that I didn't really understand anyway, it really improved things quite a bit. But that was a big learning, and still probably is a learning, but definitely very much at the beginning.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, right? Like we often think, especially in this role, and I think that there is some truth in this. So I'm definitely not knocking it, but we do expect that someone in leadership knows a few things, right?
Right.
And so when you maybe are coming from a different background or different experience set, or you didn't go that traditional route, the sort of how you learned that or the depth at which you've learned that, sometimes you have to like test that out a little bit, right? Like, because you're like, do I know what I think I know? And so I think there's this humility that has to come in those conversations around like, I don't know the answer to this question, right? And it's one thing I love about my board, for instance. We have someone that sits on our board who's phenomenal. I'm like, here's what I think I know, right? Like, what is right about that and what is wrong about that? Like, correct, help me correct course.
Yes.
And he has sort of helped me extrapolate that into even our conversations with investors and things like that. And the rest of the board is, hey, here's what I know. Here's what I think I know, right? Like, let's have a conversation about the parts that I think I know, and you can help me, and maybe that will change some of the things that I know. But like, let's do that together in a really meaningful way that moves this particular company forward, because I know it better than you do. That I do know. I know my business. I know what we're doing. I know how we're serving. I know what my team is doing. I know how we can do this together. And you know a bunch of other stuff. So what do you know that I don't, that I need to know to move this boat forward? So I really appreciate that perspective that you have.
That's a good way. And I like the way you just put that, because that is true. It's like, your business better, but tell me, it's like walking up to that edge of like, am I too far over the edge? Can you pull me back? Because I'm not sure if I am, if I'm overthinking it, or if I really am over the edge. It's what I think I know.
That's good. So one of the things that I've heard you say in the past, in other interviews, is that active listening is a really core part of your leadership perspective. And I'm curious, in thinking about these rooms that you're walking into with all of these different folks, like, what does it look like really practically to be an active listener in those rooms? And then to get everyone on the same page moving forward, and here's why I'm especially interested. I'm interested in the question in general, so you can extrapolate to any scenario. And I am also curious, because you are such a small company and a small team, it is entirely possible that there have been times when you've worked at these small companies when there are more people not involved in your day-to-day in the conversation about the choices that your company needs to be making than there are people doing the work every day, driving the boat. And so I'm really curious about how you're using that sort of active listening to get everyone on the same page and sort of row in the same direction.
Oh yeah, it's gotten harder in the age of remote working too. So it is very much a very, very core part of how I lead. I listen, I restate it to other people. I'm constantly trying to make sure that we're aligned. Like that is, and that anybody that's worked for me, they'll always say, "Oh, Beth is talking about context again," because that's the word I use all the time. I'm like, you got to have context, because I'm convinced that if you have that context, then you will make better decisions. You'll be able to innovate on your own. If you know all the things around it, then you're going to be able to do this. So, I mean, obviously it's very important to me. So I impose it on everybody else as well. And you don't get that context unless you've listened really acutely to everybody, like really, really down to the, what is the real problem we're trying to solve questions. You just kind of keep picking at them because everybody's working in these small settings. They're just going really fast. Like everybody's always trying to solve something. They're always going. And being able to like really know the root cause, to know when it's okay to just keep going or it's okay to keep going right now. But we're not going to solve the root problem unless we do X, Y, and Z. So that cycle is happening all the time, every day, practically, just trying to kind of keep everybody on the same page towards those same goals, and also ensure that we aren't just going and not thinking. You asked the question of like on a practical level, like how do you do that? It's hard. We try to bring people together. I have in true startup fashion, like, tried stuff and iterated on it, like to see like, well, does this work better? Or if we post it here, is this information better? Should we get this small group together? Should we get this small group together less frequently? Should we get the small group together more frequently? There's all the typical process things that there's no one size fits all. It's a function of both the people, the remoteness, the size, the functions. There's so many pieces that go into it. So you don't know it's working until it's working. I think the times I know it's working is when I hear somebody repeat back to me some of those high level goals. Like, I'm doing this, but the most important thing is enrollment, or
Right.
the most important thing is engaging with our patients, whatever. If they start repeating that back to me, I know that it's getting through.
I really appreciate that, because it is easy to get caught in the trap that you've communicated something because I've said it, therefore you should have heard it. Right. And
Oh my
even if you
gosh.
did hear it, what did you interpret? Right. So there's just those layers, and that's just like communication stuff.
It is.
But it's so easy to, I think, especially no matter what the size of your team, whether it's 2 people or 10 people or, 20,000 people, it can be very, because you have so many things happening.
Yeah.
And you understand the gravity of the thing that you have said or shared, because you, to your point, have context, that it can be very easy to forget that that person doing that job does not know the weight with which I am trying to say this thing unless I specifically say, this is super important. I need you to listen to this.
You are right.
Because I assume sometimes I'm like, I said that. Why the hell are we having this conversation again?
Right.
And the reality is like, well, yeah, but you're not in my head. You don't know that this is a 10 out of 10 on the shit you're supposed to be listening to Natasha say out loud, Right, so, yeah, right. So I really appreciate that context.
Yeah. And I really don't think we should minimize the remote working impact, because you're not seeing so you're just hearing my words. You're not seeing my body language, or in my case, like my hands are always moving. You see maybe a little more body language than normal, but you don't see my body language. You don't overhear things. So you don't know that that issue came up 3 times already this morning. So boy, it must be a problem.
Right.
You just heard it that one time. There are a number of things related to this that make it harder.
Yeah. Very, very, very true. One that I want to pull on, I want to talk a little bit about SonarMD and what you're doing and how you're solving, because as you've grown, you've gone through some pretty big shifts. I mean, even from like, hey, patient enrollment on a whiteboard to, 80% digital engagement. Like that's a massive company and culture shift. So
Yeah.
as you've been going through those things, how have you been sort of leading through those changes, being remote, being all these other things? What are some of the practical ways that you've made some of those shifts?
It's good to be reminded of that, Natasha, because sometimes I'm in the here and now and I've forgotten how far we've come. So I guess that's one point that I should remind my team about as well, because that's important. I've been relatively blessed with having a pretty stable team. I haven't had a ton of turnover, and that itself can help to smooth out some of the edges around those transitions as you grow, because there's enough people with historical knowledge of how you do things and how, kind of the core of what we're trying to accomplish that will help you be ambassadors throughout the company to ensure that you're continuing to row in the same direction. We're still not huge, and so I'd love it actually if the problem were that we were much bigger and I had to tackle it at the next level,
Sure.
because that would mean that I'm bigger and I have more to tackle. The thing that I think a lot about, we have a upcoming meeting with the whole company, and so one of the things that I think happens is you start to get a little further removed from the patient. You get further removed from the patient and the person that you're actually working with. So in this digital age, it's if you move from a whiteboard where you talk about the person that got on the phone with you and said, yeah, this is going to be the best program ever, and I'm so excited, and then we have names for certain people. We had some guy named Eugene, and Eugene was a sweet man, and so we would hear Eugene's stories from the person that was helping to do the enrollment. You have this instant connection because of all of those small company things, and then you move to doing it all digitally, and you go through COVID, and everybody's remote for so long, and you don't get to be in person, and everything just starts to move further and further away from the places that you're having the impact. So the most important things I'm continue to work on and we're going to do at our all company meeting is get it back to the reminder of the end user, of the who is this impacting? What are they like? What do they care about? Some different people in the organizations hear that on a regular basis, but the person doing the coding is not, or the person that is my finance person is not. So you have to be overt about making those connections back to the why, and I think that helps to weather the growth and changes, because the things that were special to you as a small company kind of go away.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I was actually at a conference, I don't know, unexpectedly a couple of weeks ago. Someone was in town that I needed to see, and they invited me to go listen to them speak. And one of the speakers was talking about it. There were a lot of healthcare people there, and one of the speakers was talking about an organization that they worked with, that at every one of their all hands, they invited one of their patients to come and talk about the direct impact that the work that the people in the room had on them. And
That's
so
cool.
A couple of times, like one example was, hey, I got married in August and my dad was there because of the pacemaker that you made that was inside of him. And so thank you, right? Like it was that kind of like, because you think about, and so it wasn't even just the guy, right, who got the pacemaker. It was like his daughter
family
said, hey, my dad walked me down the aisle in August because you did this thing. And I thought that was a really powerful experience, because like we work with human beings who are getting jobs.
Yeah.
Or trying to get work. And so for me, it's always like, what is that person that now has been seen past their resume for who they are, what they bring to the table, that we have helped facilitate? Like, how do we keep connecting our development team or a social media person. She lives in Spain. She's awesome. How do we connect her to that this human has a different job and their family now has a different opportunity? Like, how do we talk about that ripple effect? So I think it's super interesting that you've mentioned that. And that was one way that I thought, wow, that's a really, really powerful way to keep your team connected to the thing that they're doing. That, even that 3 times removed piece, right, is so critical. So I'm interested that let's talk a little bit about what you all do. I keep talking about medical stuff, and you've said you're in the background, but let's talk a little bit about what your company does and how you're solving and how it's different.
Yeah. So we manage patients that have inflammatory bowel disease, which is Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. It's a very high cost disease. It's very disruptive to your life disease. In fact, I am currently at Ochsner Health System in New Orleans, and I got to spend the morning at their IBD clinic learning a little bit more about how they manage their patient population. And so I got to hear all the stories. I got to use my listening to hear all the stories about what do they face? Because, you get to come in and see your doctor every, 6 months or maybe once a year. So what happens in between those visits? And so we're the in between the visits. We are reaching out to the patient on a regular basis and collecting their symptoms so that they don't have to say, if you have a chronic disease, you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a little worse today or not. Like I'm probably, I think I'm the same. I don't know. So you don't have to think that. You get to we collect symptoms on a longitudinal basis. We calculate a score for you. And then we compare your fluctuations to that score so that we can determine whether or not you're potentially deteriorating and need to get in to see a doctor. So that's the acute part of what we do. But we also pair that with wraparound services. So it's not just that your check engine light has gone on. We need to also make sure that you're getting your oil changed on time. So how can we connect you to the right nutrition therapy or GI trained psychologists or sleep resources, because that's a huge issue. Your inflammation creates sleep disruption. Your sleep disruption creates inflammation. So you gotta fix that cycle. So we're really everything that we can be to manage this very difficult set of patients. From a business model standpoint, we do this by contracting with a payer, typically contract with the payer and say, hey, let us take care of this population. And if we take care of them in a better way, better outcomes, better price, you can share in the savings with us. So that's how we do it from a business model standpoint. So from just we go up a level. We cost the system less. Patients love it. Practices who can't possibly call patients all the time between visits to check in on them. We just heard today they get 100 messages a day. 100.
Of course they do, because it's a very challenging disease to have.
Yes. So you can't do that. You can't do that effectively. But everybody's in this business to make patients feel better. So how can we do that? So I feel really, really good about what we are doing for the system because it's very, very well aligned.
I love it. I have a very dear friend of mine who has Crohn's. To be honest, we have teased her since she was 18. She's had like the body of a 90-year-old. Like just like anything could happen, it was going to happen. But this is one thing that she has had to deal with since we've known each other. And it is such a life impacting disease. Yes. And she has a lot of resources, right? So she's fortunate in that regard. And so many people don't. And so I was interested. I picked up on the fact that you mentioned, nutrition, but also psychology, because it is such a, like that mind-body connection, right? And what I love about what you're doing is because it's business, right? And we are I'm all for capital markets, very frankly. But I also think humans should be at the center of capital markets and like what we build and how we serve. So I'm weird like that. Maybe not as weird, but I do believe in
hope not.
capitalism.
Yes.
And right, they're like
And
not mutually exclusive for me. But the reason why I'm saying all this is because I do think that there is, in our country in particular, just the way our healthcare system is set up and the business that we have wrapped around healthcare, we are much more prepared because there's more money to be made on the backside of treating a problem than there is on the front end of prevention. And so what I really like about what you all are doing is it's sort of a step in, not even a step, it's several steps in the direction of how do we mitigate the symptoms of the disease? How do we mitigate the progression of the disease rather than, okay, let's just throw a bunch of expensive pills at it on the backside? And now that may be part of the problem. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But
right.
there is so much that can be done from a preventative perspective if you could scale what you're scaling, which is that like patient check-in, right? And if we can like incrementally get that further and further and further toward the beginning of the process and or before the thing actually starts, right?
Yes.
Like just imagine the impact. So I love how you're doing it. How did you land on like, this is a starting place for a disease that you wanted to touch on, but B, like, hey, you know how we could improve this is like, let's go upstream and touch that. Maybe that's your engineering background. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. It's funny because I love that when you talk about it, it doesn't matter that it's IBD. I mean, it does, but there are lots of diseases that behave in the same way. Where if you go upstream, you are going to make patients healthier, and then the really stream consequences of people being in hospitals are not necessary. And you can do that all over the place, and people are doing that. There's tons of companies out there that are doing that. The business model part is one of the challenges. I say this all the time. People say, there's this really cool thing where this cool device that'll tell you this. And if we just gave it to people, then they'll know. And then, they won't end up in the hospital. I'm just making this up. Right.
Sure.
And nobody, and I would say, nobody can pay for it because our system doesn't reward upstream right now. So you have to figure out that back part too. You got to figure that out. Unfortunately, like you do, but you have to figure out, how do I get paid for better outcomes? Period.
Yeah.
So how I found my way to it, we were founded by a GI physician, so a passionate, very entrepreneurial GI physician. He's always always finding a problem, but he's also just a classic entrepreneur, like not just finding the problem, like testing it and trying to do it right away. Like just, kind of, and he figured it out. So what he figured out was, I have these patients that are showing up in the ER. They've been my patients for years. Why didn't they call me? And so he figured out, well, number one, they didn't recognize that their symptoms had deteriorated. But number two, like, how are we going to get in touch with them between visits all the time? So he had a rudimentary system built to try to collect this symptom data that would then he tested the algorithm. Is it working? Is it actually predicting things? And got some data from Blue Cross of Illinois so that he could see whether or not that prediction was correct. And sure enough, his control had way better outcomes than, his managed population had way better outcomes than the control. So I like joining companies when there's this like germ of an idea that just needs to be built, like just needs to be kind of built out a little bit. And so that's the point that I joined. So I was part of the founding management team. There were 5 of us at the beginning, different CEO who I learned a ton from. So that was really, really good experience. But it sort of was a little bit my passion for, again, lots of problem solving. Like you get to like innovate all kinds of ways to commercialize a an idea. This is the third time I've done that. So I was at 2 previous startups where I also joined as the first employee. So that I recognize I kind of have a passion for building and growing something from start.
Okay, I was going to go in a different direction.
And then
you said that.
Else.
Yeah, which I love. So I'm going to ask the second question first. And that is, there is this fine line between, and I'm very lucky, so I hope nobody listening is extrapolating that this is the current situation that I'm in. It is not. But there is this fine line between a founder, right, and a founder CEO, or a founder and a CEO. There can be tension. Again, this is not the situation I'm in right now. I love my co-founders. We have a wonderful working relationship. And I have worked in other places where that has not always been the case.
Yes.
So I'm very curious now, having done this 3 times and coming in at this very early stage, as a leader, you were the person that is executing the plan, often probably creating the strategy, right? Like you're taking the germ of an idea and building it into a thing. How do you as a leader find that balance very practically between, all right, here's this notion and this founder who has this, clearly they have a passion for it or they wouldn't have built the thing, right? Or they
Correct.
have a deep expertise in something, like this physician, and he had both passion and expertise. How do you walk that line between they think they know better and you actually might know better?
Yeah, it's you may have been in a few of my conversations, like this is like, I mean, this is like classic startup problems.
It totally
classic,
is. It is.
like,
It is. Educate us.
So I like to say that the things that make you a founder are things that don't always make you the best to operationalize it, and the things that make you good to operationalize it often don't make you a good founder either. So I really, really have tried and continue to try to remind myself of that, because the same spirit that the founder brings, the go, 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 experiment, try this, no that, do like no bad ideas kind of thing. You want that in your organization. You want some part of it. It can't be all of it, because otherwise you will be all over the place and you'll be driving people crazy because you're trying too many things. And every single one of my founders have been a little different, interestingly. But all of them have had that characteristic. And I'm a twin. I'm easy to, I work well with other people, like you have to appreciate exactly who they are, and frustration included. Like you have to just be like, yeah, that's but you have to appreciate the good that comes with it. So you have to let them be that side too. Our founder physician is all of those things. He's an Energizer bunny. He's like early 70s and he sleeps less than I do. I mean, he's incredible. Like he's incredible. And he'll also drive you crazy. He'll also, like, for sure, because he's got 100 ideas and he doesn't know why you didn't do it yesterday.
Right.
And we ultimately, I think, have gotten the company to a place where he trusts that we're going to take care of his baby well enough.
Yeah.
And he had a new idea anyway.
Right.
So he's stepped away from the day to day. So
Sure.
that's your goal. Your goal is to like kind of get them there. In the last two companies, the one case, the founder stayed the CEO, and I think she had some operational background, so she perhaps had a little less of the chaos part. In the last one, I would say the the founder was a little more absent-minded professor-y. Like he was less compulsive, drive you nuts, although I guess he had some of that too. But
we all do.
But yeah, I mean, you have to. Again, you have to. But he was a little bit of like, he was 5 steps ahead of where the market was. So you had to kind of pull him back on, okay, but here's what we can sell right now.
Right.
And I don't want you to stop dreaming, because if you stop dreaming, that's not good for the company either. But kind of doing that balance of, but here's what we can actually commercialize in the market right now was the challenge there. So they've all been a little different.
I love it. That's
the founder
awesome.
whisperer, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. That should be the title of your next book or your first book if you haven't written one.
Go, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you before we go. The first one is, what have I not asked you that I should have? And or is there something you'd like to leave us with as just a sort of parting thought around keeping humanity in our work as leaders?
Yeah. I expected, partially because you are a woman and I am a woman, and this is human, and I've talked about it quite a lot in past things that we didn't talk about, the fact that I'm a female leader as opposed to the traditional, again, white man, and there's plenty more of us out there, I know that now, and I do think it played a pretty big role in how I developed. I also, as a leader, because especially I think let's overlay how I developed as a leader over a period of time in the world where we were a little slower. We're getting there. We're getting a little. It's improving. It is definitely improving. It's definitely improving. And I would say I'm excited. I want to tell people I'm excited about the next generation, and I hope that I have created an environment and taught people that they can be exactly who they want to be. They can be incredibly authentic and be successful, and be female, and use female traits to express themselves, and that's all going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. People are going to get used to it, and the world is not going to worry about whether or not you're too nice or too emotional or too not masculine. I don't know what the things are, because we've moved along, because we've gotten further.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And my last question is, how can we be helpful to you? If listeners are interested in what you had to say, or, interested in your work, how can they get in touch with you? How can they be helpful to you? How can they amplify what you're doing?
Yeah, well, if you are a narrow audience, then we want you as a customer, but that's not where I'm going to go. If you have a passion for healthcare and healthcare technology and helping people, and you have a problem-solving spirit and a work with others personality, then send us a note, because you just never know. That might be the right fit for the different roles that we have at any given point in time. So that certainly is something, and you can go to our website, SonarMD.com, to do that. And, I think, just repeating some of the things that meant something to you, I think would be another way that you can help to amplify that humanness of leadership that I think is really important.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It was very enlightening, and your authenticity shone through. So no worries there. Yeah, that was evident. So you're doubling down on that, which is good. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Thank you. Okay. Another fantastic conversation with someone who's willing not only to show up and be themselves. I mean, she talked about authenticity right out of the gate, but with some really fantastic practical suggestions and tips. Love that. I love it. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Beth, for being here. If you have questions for us or for her, let us know. Reach out. We love hearing from you. Her information will be in the show notes. In the meantime, I will see you the next time around, and keep the human side up.